So, what's it really going to take to send people to Mars and, bring them back alive? Well, the answer might not be what you think. It has a lot less to do with rocket science and a whole lot more to do with the ultimate human challenge: teamwork.
I mean, think about it like this. Picture the longest, most grueling road trip you can imagine. Now make it 3 years long. And instead of a car, you're crammed into a space smaller than an RV. Oh, and there are no rest stops, just the endless, cold vacuum of space. How on earth do you manage that? That is the question at the heart of NASA's Mars plan.
And this table, wow, this really lays out the massive leap we're talking about. We're all pretty familiar with the International Space Station, right? It's huge, like a four-bedroom house, and if things go wrong, you can be home in a matter of hours. But Mars, we're talking about a 2 to 3 year trip in a vehicle the size of a mid-sized RV. And check out that last row: crew autonomy. It goes from low to high. That right there changes everything.
Let's just sit with these numbers for a second. 3 years with the same three people in a tiny space. You're not just colleagues anymore. You're roommates, your family, you're each other's doctors, therapists, and first responders, all while being 140 million miles away from every other person you know. The psychological pressure is just unbelievable. Researchers actually have a name for this kind of pressure cooker: an isolated, confined, and extreme environment. They call it an ice environment. And in an ice environment, every little problem gets magnified. A simple disagreement can explode into a major conflict. A minor annoyance can feel like the end of the world. It is the ultimate test of a team. So, how in the world does NASA even begin to prepare for that? Well, the whole process starts way, way before anyone even sees a rocket. It begins with finding the exact right people. But what the right stuff means for a Mars mission, well, that idea has changed a lot over the years. See, in the early days of spaceflight, it was all about pure technical skill. You had to be an incredible pilot or a brilliant engineer. That was it. Then, as missions got longer on the ISS, they added a new layer: individual psychological health. But for Mars, that's still not enough. Now, there's a third, absolutely crucial step: seeing how applicants actually work together to solve tough problems under stress. Being a lone wolf genius just won't cut it anymore. So this is the kind of profile that decades of research has pointed to. And a lot of it makes perfect sense, right? Emotionally stable, resilient, adaptable, of course. But look at that fifth point: low to moderate extroversion. It turns out you want to avoid the extremes. An extreme introvert might withdraw and isolate themselves, which is bad. But a super strong extrovert, they might need constant social energy that just isn't there. And that can really start to wear on the rest of the crew. It's all about that balance. Okay, so you found four amazing individuals who fit the profile. Your job is done, right? Nope, not even close. The next puzzle, and it's arguably even harder, is composing them into a crew, a single unit that can work and live together for 3 solid years. One of the absolute biggest dangers that mission planners are trying to avoid is something called fault lines. Think of them as invisible cracks that can split a team right down the middle. We're not talking about surface-level stuff, but deep-seated differences in values or personalities. If a fault line forms, your crew of four can suddenly become two competing pairs, and in deep space, that's a complete disaster. So, what's the glue that stops those cracks from forming? This quote from a real ISS astronaut's journal gives us a huge clue. It's the soft skills. Things like humor, being able to laugh at a tense situation, being able to communicate. These aren't just nice-to-haves. On a mission to Mars, they are absolutely mission critical. All right, so you've picked the individuals and you've composed the crew. The next phase is training. And we're talking about training that goes so far beyond just flying the spaceship. It's about training to survive the journey together. NASA's training really runs on two parallel tracks. You can think of it as working together and living together. On one side, you have all the technical teamwork: how to communicate and solve problems during a critical task. But on the other side, you have the skills for just plain group living: how to take care of yourself, how to take care of your teammates, and how to manage conflict. You need both to survive. But here's a massive wrench in the works for a 3-year mission: something called skill decay. Astronauts on the space station right now report that they forget training they got just 2 years earlier. Now, on the ISS, that's okay. They can just call Mission Control for a quick refresher. On the way to Mars, you are completely on your own.
And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most important piece of this whole puzzle. When that crew is millions of miles from home, when they are truly on their own, how do you support them through the day in, day out grind of the mission? This one number says it all. 45 minutes. That's the potential round-trip communication delay. So you ask Houston a question, and you could be waiting 3/4 of an hour for a reply. In any emergency, any time-sensitive situation, Mission Control can't help. They're just watching. The crew has to be a self-healing, self-sufficient team.
So NASA is developing some really clever, non-intrusive ways to keep an eye on the team's health. We're talking about sociometric badges that can tell who's talking to whom and even the intensity in their voice. Or software that analyzes written logs to see if the crew is using words like we and us more than I and me, which is a huge indicator of a healthy team. The goal is to get a read on the team's dynamics without ever getting in their way.
But it's not just about monitoring, it's about giving them tools to help themselves. For example, they're creating guided debrief tools that basically help the crew have those tough, necessary conversations. As one astronaut who tested it said, it allows everyone to be honest. It gives the team a structured way to fix their own problems before they get too big.
And if you ever, for a second, doubt how important this all is, just listen to this. This is a quote from an astronaut describing what happened when they were trying to take a simple group photo on the ISS. The conflict got so bad, he said, "I thought we were going to lose a member of the crew during that one." A group photo. Now imagine that level of tension during a real life or death emergency.
Getting humans to Mars is going to be one of the greatest technical feats in history. There's no doubt about it. But this all makes you wonder, for a trip like this, is the greatest distance to cross the 140 million miles of empty space? Or is it the few challenging feet that separate one crewmate from another?